Welcome to the RoboTalk podcast, your ultimate source for all things Robotech, anime, and more. Each week we dive into the world of anime, offering insights, interviews, and discussions about the classics and the modern hits. In today's very special episode, we bring you an exclusive interview with Tony Oliver, the legendary voice actor known for voicing Rick Hunter in the iconic Robotech series. Originally recorded in 2010 by our very own Tom Bateman, this interview offers a fascinating glimpse into Tony's early career, his pivotal role in bringing Rick Hunter to life, and his incredible journey through the world of the Power Rangers. Whether you're a longtime Robotech fan or new to the series, this is an episode you won't want to miss. So sit back, relax, and join us for this insightful conversation with one of the pioneers of anime voice acting. Let's jump into it.
How did you first get involved in filmmaking? What was your original exposure to that, and what made you decide to get into that?
Well, filmmaking kind of was a natural desire to come out of the fact that I really wanted to be an actor and a singer. Those were my two things, and it kind of stems from, I know this sounds silly and cliche, but it stems from my fifth grade choir. I was in the choir in fifth grade, and it was the Christmas pageant or Christmas program, and I was asked to sing a solo, and in Silver Bells. It was just a verse for Silver Bells, and I went up and I sang my heart out, and when I got done, I got a standing ovation, and I thought, this is pretty cool. And that really started my desire to perform. And I continued to perform. In school, I did a lot, junior high drama and plays. And I was always getting reasonably decent parts. So I thought, I might be okay at this. So after I kind of got out of school and I hit the street and was auditioning a lot. And I didn't have a lot of success. I did a lot of theater in Los Angeles, but you don't get paid a lot for that. I did a couple of movies that are very, very forgettable, and I was pretty forgettable in them. And eventually I got pretty desperate and started looking in the trades, which is how I got a career. I started looking in the trade papers and answered an ad for a movie company that was looking for voice for actors who could sound like they were under 18 but weren't, and so but they had to have experience. So I went ahead and I called them up and I got an audition and in terms of the experience, I just lied, frankly. I told them I had experience and I didn't. And I went in and I auditioned and I landed the part, and it was a voice acting role in a movie called The Sea Prince and the Fire Child, which was anime. And I had really never seen anime before. This was a whole new process. I mean, I was aware that movies were dubbed from one language to another, but I was not aware of what the process was. I didn't know it was done in Los Angeles. I thought it was mostly done in New York. And so I went in really early the first day of work and watched somebody else work, somebody else who eventually became a fellow cast member in Robotech, Greg Finley. I went in and I watched him work for about an hour so I could see what the process was. And I had spoken the night before to a friend of mine who was an ADR supervisor for a TV company. She kind of showed me what the ropes were so I wouldn't go in and completely make a fool of myself. And I did the role, and I had the best time, and it went really well, and that ended up on television. So that was really my first. I wasn't even thinking about filmmaking at this point. I'm thinking about, I got paid to act. How cool is that? Also, at the time, I already had a child. I was married with a baby, and it was tough making ends meet. In fact, at the time I was doing The Sea Prince and the Fire Child. I was also shooting a movie at night and doing a play in the evening downtown. So it was literally round the clock for a couple of months there while I worked all that out. That eventually ended up on the air, and then one day, out of the blue, I get a telephone call from a guy by the name of Robert Barron. And he had this very deep voice. Tony, we like the work that you did on Sea Prince and the Fire Child and would like you to come in and audition. But it'll be a paid audition, which I'd never heard of. So I came into a studio called Intersound, and they were doing a Japanese soap opera.
Was that how it was described to you?
No, this was not. This was not what you think it is.
It was an actual real
live
soap opera.
action soap opera, Japanese soap opera, and they wanted me to play the voice of this one kid, and it was really kind of done in a very strange way. But we went ahead and recorded it, and he said, while you're here, read for this. So I did a little quick audition while I was there. And a few weeks later, I get a phone call, come on in and record. We're doing this little thing. It's just 3 episodes put together. It's not a big deal. It's probably not going to go anywhere. It's called Macross. And come on in and play this. You're playing Rick Yamada, which is the name of the character. So I went in, and it turned out to be the lead character in this thing. And we recorded it in a few days, and I went away. I didn't hear anything. And next thing I know, I get a phone call again. You got to come in. This thing has gone to series. It's now called Robotech. And you're the main guy, so come on in and work. And I was stunned, and suddenly I was on a TV series, and I'd never worked on a television series, and all because it's anime, and I'm still trying to figure out what all this anime is about. Where did it come from? Why is everybody so interested in it?
Now, when you read for that part, for the part of Rick Hunter, had you seen the animation before? And when did you first finally see your work up on the screen? I mean, seeing yourself as Rick Hunter.
Honestly, the first time, because I didn't see I didn't see the Macross movie that we put together, which is based on the first 3 episodes of whatever eventually became Robotech. I didn't see that till after we had already started work on the TV series. So I think the first time I actually saw Robotech with my voice was on the air when it aired on a local television station, and it was a thrilling. I got to tell you, it was a thrilling day for me, because my whole life I'd wanted to be on TV, and here, it's not me, it's my voice, but hey, I'm on TV, and it was getting such good notices, and suddenly there was a buzz about it, and even my son, who was. Oh, my son was like in kindergarten at the time. His little friends knew about it, which was unusual considering it was, a show really pointed at older kids. But there was a little bit of a buzz, and it was quite heady at the time. Interestingly enough, that was going to be my swan song. I was quitting show business at that point. I actually moved out of town, went to work in a radio station up in Central California. I was pretty much done because I had a second child up at that point, and Robotech is what actually kind of kicked off enough interest to bring me back to LA and get back in and actually have the career that I've had.
Wow. When you were watching the show, I mean, obviously when you're recording the show, you're reading lines of dialogue. But when you actually sit and watch the show, you're seeing it in a different context because you're seeing the whole story. Was what you saw on the screen, do you suddenly realize, well, wait a second, this character's a lot more than what I was thinking when I was in the booth?
Well, no, not really. I mean, as an actor, you want to get as much information as you can. And fortunately for me, the directors were very good. Steve Kramer and Greg Snegoff did most of the directing with me. Sometimes Bob Barron, but they were very good at kind of pointing out the complexities of the character as we were going. It was evident to me as we're watching this, as we're recording it, that this is a lot deeper than any animated, cartoon that I'd ever seen. And particularly when we got to the episode where Roy is killed, they didn't tell us about that. I didn't know about that till I was actually in the booth recording the lines, and I read the lines and I look at the screen. I had to turn to I forgot who was directing that day. Did he actually die? I was stunned, and so a lot of the emotion that you get out of that is genuine. It was genuine surprise and kind of feeling uncomfortable about it. I'd never known about a cartoon that dies. To this day, I use that as a directing technique when I have a character who has to suffer something emotionally because of a death. I don't tell the actor before they come in. I let them discover it as they go. It's much more effective. It really worked with me. And then at some point, Carl wrote us all a letter. Carl Masek, who directed it, who produced the show. He wrote us a letter that kind of explained what his vision was. And the vision was even deeper than the video that we were looking at in terms of he had this circular story in mind where Rick and Lisa and Minmay would end up going way back in time and eventually finding the Robotech masters and then having a baby who becomes the first really powerful Robotech master who starts the whole thing, and it turns into a big circle. And I thought that was very cool. I know that's not how it ended up, but that was his vision at the time. And so I knew it was a little different. and before I got to see it, and seeing the reaction of the audience, which is what's the most important thing, really kind of confirmed that.
So going on from Robotech, what did you do then for your entertainment career?
Didn't work a lot. No. I at the time, my wife had always wanted to be a writer, and there was an opportunity to start writing on some of these animes, and we called it writing, but it's really adapting. But well, it is now. Back then, it was writing. We didn't get a lot of translations. It was the practice was to kind of Americanize it as much as you could, and try to stick to the story, but forget what the Japanese are saying. Make it good dialogue for Americans. So there was a lot of writing involved, but she really had trouble seeing sync, which is something I could do. So I got a chance to work a little bit. Actor-director by the name of Tom Weiner gave us an opportunity to write a piece of an episode he was doing. It was a weird version of Captain Harlock. It was called Captain Harlock and the Queen of 1,000 Years, which was this blending of two different series, much like Robotech tried, but much less successfully. And wrote a piece of it, and I found that we had a knack for it. So she would write the stories, I would sync it up, and we'd send it in. So we both of us, my wife and I, embarked on a writing career together, doing some of this stuff. In the meantime, I was out of town working in radio and local television, but in sales, on the business side of things, not on the creative. And eventually, we ended up working on a show called Macross 1 for Saban Entertainment. And my wife couldn't finish an episode, so it was some family emergency that she needed to take care of, and so but we needed the money, so I went ahead and finished it and realized I kind of have a knack for writing too, and that led me to start looking for writing work down here. And I came back to Los Angeles as a story editor, as a writer for Saban Entertainment on a show called Noozles, which was on Nickelodeon at the time. And I kind of became their anime go-to guy, working with, ironically, Bob Barron and Tom Weiner and Steve Kramer and all these people that I had worked with before, and I'd been recommended for the job by Greg Snagoff. So it was all of those Robotech connections really played into me moving forward to that side of my career. And I worked my way up at Saban Entertainment. I worked there 11 years and worked my way up from basic temp story editor to my final title was executive producer of special projects when I left. So it was quite a fun 11 years, and that included the Power Ranger years too.
Moving into anime, obviously with Robotech, you're initially exposed to that world. But then there was the big anime craze, in which a lot of stuff that was coming over, that was being produced in Japan, was making its way over to the United States. What were some of your experiences getting into that?
Well, a lot of that happened while I was working at Saban. And while I was there, I saw some of it coming through because we had shows like Bob in a Bottle and Wowzer and Samurai Pizza Cats, and I was involved in all of those either at a story level or as associate producer. And later I started that's when I started directing, was when I was there. When I'd have to fill in for somebody who was sick, I learned how to direct that way, filling in for Tom Weiner sometimes. And so a lot of that happened. A lot of the base work happened there. Megazone 23 came out during that period of time, which really kind of stirred the pot quite a bit. Funimation was kind of coming into its life at the time, so they were bringing out titles that the West Coast companies really weren't considering at the time. And so when it was time to leave Saban, it was right as the anime craze was starting to peak, was starting to really kind of really become mainstream, I guess is what I want to say. So I spent, I thought that I had left Saban, I needed to make a living, and so I started looking for different ways to continue doing what I like to do, and including directing. So I started looking for a lot of directing work. And I eventually weaseled my way into a couple of company situations, got people to try me out again, because I wasn't on the scene for quite a while as an actor. And what was most available to me was voice acting. So that's the direction I went. I went back to my roots and went back to voice acting, and managed to land a part as a lead character in an anime called Vandread, where I played Hibiki, and that really kind of opened things up for me because it was a new style anime. It was beautifully animated. It was an interesting story, and it was the folks at Bang Zoom Entertainment that kind of brought me in to do that, and introduced me to them, who I work with still to this day. But it was a pivotal role for me in that it was high profile enough that it got other people interested in listening to me and taking me seriously as an actor again, which may be the first time I'd ever really been taken seriously as an actor at that level. That led me to I kept weaseling and trying. That led me to the Bang Zoom folks allowed me to direct a little bit, and they realized that I had a talent for that. And so I direct a good portion of their anime to this day. I've done recently Eureka 7, both the movie and the TV series, Gurren Lagann, which has been very popular out there, Gankutsuo, the Count of Monte Cristo, all of those I've directed. On the voice acting side, I was able to do that. I talked about Vandread, Shinbo, and Chobits. And the thing that's been the most high profile for me was the voice of Lupin on the TV series Lupin the Third, which I'm the last guy I would have ever cast. But thank God Richard Epcar was there. He liked me, and he directed me in the right way and kept me funny, and so he gets the credit for that one. But that was a lot of fun.
Tony, you've been involved in so many different anime projects. What sort of research do you do as an actor and as a director, since you've been both in front of the mic and behind the microphone? How much research do you do into the anime that you watch or that you perform in?
Well, as an actor, often I'm not entirely sure what it is I'm working on until I get to the studio. So there's not a lot of research. If I do happen to know what the title is, or know a little something about it, I will go look it up online and kind of get a very general overview. The last time I did that is I got the role of Ulquiorra in Bleach, and so I tried to look up Bleach and get a sense of what that show is about, and it confused me to no end. So I kind of had to let Wendy Lee, who directs it, kind of walk me through it and get me there. As a director, it's different. I need to know the story entirely. So I will do as much reading and research as I possibly can. I will look up the characters. I'll look up every website. If there's, I'll usually pick one or two websites and go through like Google Translate and have some of that translated so I can see what's going on. I do also look at Anime News Network and places like sources like that where I can get I can read commentaries from people that have seen it in Japanese, Americans who have seen it in Japanese, because that's kind of an important thing to see what they think of. Not that I'm going to alter anything, but it gives me a sense of how the show speaks to the audience so that I can fit in correctly with it. And then I spend some time with the producers, if I'm not producing it, with the producers and learn what it is that they're looking for. One of the nice things that's happened in anime in the last 10 years or 20 years is from the time that I got into it, where everything was most of the anime I did, I never saw a translation. I would get the picture, I would get a 4-sentence synopsis of what's going on, and we made up the dialogue completely. That's not acceptable anymore. As anime became more mainstream, it's important now, and what the studios are looking for is to maintain as close to the Japanese original intent and dialogue as we possibly can and still make it accessible to an English-speaking audience. So I have in front of me at any time the translations. I know what the Japanese wanted to say. And my job now as a director is to make sure that however we say it in English, it evokes that same emotional content. That's both, for me, a lot easier because I don't have to invent that emotional content. I just need to interpret it, both as a director and as an actor. I've got a lot more guidance, and the Japanese, because I'm seeing the full translations and what the intent of the original director was and what the intent of the original writer was, it gives me a much better sense of the story, so that my direction is going to be much more in keeping with what the story should be, and will communicate to the audience what the Japanese originally intended to communicate. So I actually like that. It's a nice aspect of it, but that requires a bit of research. Fortunately, I get to adapt most of what I direct, so that's kind of nice. I get it on both sides.
What anime that you worked on that particularly jumps out at you, that you look at, that surprised you when you received it, and that it became a project that you saw as something of really high quality?
I fall in love with every show I direct, so it's tough. But the one that really stood out, there's like 3 that have stood out really the most to me as a director. One of them is a show called Flag. It's not well known. It's 13 episodes. It's very photoreal animation, but still has that bit of 2D anime quality to it. It's a very interesting geopolitical drama. Takes place just a little bit in the future. So any of the mechs that are there are mechs that the United States military is probably already in development with and will deploy soon. Kind of that kind of technology, and it follows this reporter who's embedded in a UN unit trying to stop a revolution in Tibet, but the whole thing is told from the point of view of her camera. So and it's done like a video blog. So there's 2 different reporters, one guy narrating, so we see what his camera sees and we see what her camera sees. So the only time we see her is when she puts the camera down and walks in front to do something. It's a really interesting way of telling a story, and there's a lot of allegory in it about what's going on today in the world. A little bit of anti-Americanism here and there, which I managed to talk them into softening. But by and large, it's about war and revolution and hatred and how these things move and the forces behind what's making the things in front happen. And it's very, very good and very surprising ending. Nice little twist on the end. That's the one of them. The other one is Planetes, which is a wonderful film. It's about this group of people who, not a film but a series, a group of people who work in space. They clean up space debris. And as a result, they're considered like garbage men and not given a lot of respect. But what's cool about it is it's an allegory about terrorism, the whole thing. Eventually you get to the end, and it asks some very interesting questions about terrorism and motivations. But also, all of the science in it is real. It's all actual real science. When I got the translations, they were notated with websites so I could go and study up on what those scientific principles they were talking about were. It was actually reviewed, and on the DVD there's a interviewed with NASA scientists, and United States Space Command was involved in as a consultant on this thing. So it's really a kind of a cool. Not only is it a good story, but it's good science. And the third one, and I know it's kind of silly, and it's really because it's recent, is Gurren Lagann. Because it's Gurren Lagann is a new style anime that's tipping its hat and giving an homage to old style anime. So it's kind of a bridging show. The characters are wonderful. You really get invested in them. And by the end of the series, when it's very Shakespearean at the end, a lot of people die. But I mean, in the studio, as we're going through these characters dying, we're all getting emotional, kind of wiping the tear from the eye. It was beautiful, It was that. And I just got really into those characters. It's just one of those stories that the characters just really get inside of you. So those are my 3 as a director.
What is the most common misconception about voice acting?
Good question. The most common misconception is that it's about funny voices. That it's, I make funny voices, I should be a voice actor. And that's great. And if you can make funny voices, that's a wonderful thing. But I'll tell you that if I want to hire somebody to do a funny voice, a strange or odd voice, I can name you 3 or 4 actors that I will call that can do anything I want them to do. And you've heard them a million times, Tom Kenny, Frank Welker, these kind of guys. And so funny voice side is pretty much handled. What voice acting is about, it's about acting. First and foremost, I've always hated the fact that in some cases I've heard, I don't want to do voice acting, I want to do real acting. Well, voice acting is real acting, and you need an acting background in order to be successful with it. You can't just speak. It's not enough. You have to emote. You have to communicate emotion with your voice, without your face, without your body, without anything else helping you. And it's pretty difficult to do if you don't have an acting background. So that's the biggest misconception. And that somehow it's easier to get into than stage or theater or film. It's just as hard to get into as any other segment of entertainment.
What sort of projects are you working on right now?
Currently, I'm spending a lot of time directing voice actors in video games right now. So that's one side. As usual, I have multiple things that I'm juggling. So I'm doing a lot of video games, both as an actor and as a director. As an actor, I just did my second stint as Bang Shishigami in Blaze Blue, which has been kind of a surprise for me on how well that's been received. In the last couple of years, I've directed a couple of video games, Eureka 7 video games, Magna Carta 2, ironically, Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, and I can't remember what the other ones were. And the other titles that I'm working on right now, I'm working on a couple right now. I've just done 3 in a row, which has been wonderful. But I can't talk about any of them until later this year when I get the clearance to the release clearances on them. So I'm doing that. I'm still continue to do my voice acting when it comes up. I'm still working. Bleach is pretty much over. I just finished doing an original cartoon, my first in 30 years. An original cartoon as a voice actor, American cartoon. Actually, it's not American. It's American style, but it's done in Italy. It's very international. But I play Obscurio, one of the villains on this this cartoon series called Gormiti, which should be out. My episodes later this year. I know the original episodes. I wasn't in the first season. I started in season 2, but I just finished recording season 3 a week ago. Unfortunately, I don't think there's going to be a season 4. So I'm doing that. I'm starting on some writing projects, which I haven't done in a while. So I'm kind of returning to writing a little bit. Going to be working on a pilot for a girls DVD series here very shortly, and also for an original animation out of India. Hopefully that's we're still working on that. And then the last thing I'm doing is I've started about 2.5 years ago. I started to teach. Working with the folks at Bang Zoom. They have a DVD called Adventures in Voice Acting, and they started to teach some classes and asked me if I would like to teach. And so I thought, sure, why not? And I found out I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really had fun doing it. So we developed a partnership, and now it's called Adventures in Voice Acting Workshops. And I've been going around the country teaching professional classes in anime and voice acting to people all over the country. I've been doing that for about 2 years. And next week I'm off to the East Coast again, and it'll be coming to a town near you. But it's fun. It's they're full day. They're 2 full day workshops. I have a beginners and an intermediate. It's boot camp. It's taught as a professional class. We spend the morning working on technique. We spend the afternoon recording. It's in a real recording studio with real scripts. So it's a lot of fun, and it's kind of a way to give back, and while making a living and enjoying myself at the same time.
How do you enjoy being part of the anime culture? Because you are known as being involved in, obviously, with Robotech and other projects beyond. How do you feel about being part of that, as far as when you deal with fans, when you interact with them?
I gotta say, and I know this sounds very cliche, but I am eternally grateful that anime exists. Anime fans are they're the most interesting. They're the most interesting fans, I think, that I can see. It's such a democratic group. I mean, I go to anime conventions, and I didn't used to, but now I do a lot of them. And you see people from all walks of life, sizes, shapes, colors, languages, accents, intelligence levels, from geek to cool, and they're all together. It doesn't matter who you are; you're part of them. You're a part of the group, and they're exceptionally kind and passionate people. And it's nice to be working on things that people are passionate about. As an artist, I mean, that's you dream for that, and here I get it every time I go to an anime convention. So it's been really kind of cool. And frankly, had it not been for anime, I would not have been pulled into Power Rangers. It was because of my anime background that they wanted me to work on Power Rangers, because I could bridge the gap there. Without anime, I would have never been able to direct. I would have not done the movies I've done. I would have not been able to do. So anime has really been the key to my entire career. And I'm so happy that it was that, and not something else.
You've been listening to the RoboTalk podcast, produced by All Pop No Culture. This show is entirely crowdfunded by our Patreon site, patreon.com/RoboTalk. Supporting us there not only helps us improve the quality of the show, but also allows us to bring in special guests such as Tony Oliver for interviews, discussions, and more. Take a look at the Patreon page and sign up to support all of the great content we have planned. And now, back to the interview.
Tony, it has been 18 years since Power Rangers started, and you have been there since the beginning. What do you think is its staying power?
Well, obviously it has some staying power because it's been around for 18 years. I left the show right at the beginning of the fourth season, right around Turbo, and I thought maybe it had a couple more years left. It's really stunned me that it's continued on for such a long time, and I think that's a testament to the folks who made it and continued to let it evolve and change. And frankly, when Disney took it over in '99 or 2000. They kind of reverted back to what the show originally was, which was kind of a live action cartoon, kind of fun, not too heavy, and that brought the show back yet again. So I think it's got a lot of staying power because it's a bit of a unique show that bridges cultures between a very Japanese idea presented in kind of an American way, and now. Well, it's no longer in production. It's finally out of production. But it was taken to New Zealand for the last 6 or 7 years. So they brought that sensibility into it and had a more international cast. And I think it's just managed to evolve right along with everyone and stay fresh for the young kids. So I'm pretty pleased it lasted as long as it was. We thought maybe we had 5 years. I mean, Saban actually told me, he said, if we should get 5 years out of this show if we're lucky.
How much do you think that was a function of the merchandising and marketing of it versus the other creative elements?
Well, the merchandising and marketing was an important part of the financial side of things because it made the show profitable, and when shows are profitable, studios make more of them. But this was one of the shows that I think the show drove the merchandising rather than the other way around. I think the reason that it took off so well at the beginning, and this is my opinion, of course, and only my opinion, but is because you have to think of the history of what was going on at the time. On television, on Saturday morning TV, you basically had Smurfs and Little Clowns of Happy Town, which are very kind of inane, silly shows. And then you had X-Men with all of these flawed, tortured, hero villains. You never quite were sure whether they were heroes or villains. And here comes this live action show, which there hadn't been a live action kids show in a long time that got any sort of play, with these 5 squeaky clean kids who were very cool, and yet they were good guys, and all of the genders were all treated the same, the races were all treated the same, everyone was equal in their heroicness, and that was something different and unusual at the time. Plus, we strove a lot to make it funny, to keep it light. Hayam Saban liked to call it a live-action cartoon. That's what he told us he wanted when we started developing the show. And so we had some cartoon elements, and we brought the elements of Bulk and Skull, the 2 comic relief characters, in order to keep it light and funny. And I think that's what had more to do with anything else. It was just something that nobody had really ever seen before, and the kids just took to it. It was easy to follow. You had 6 basic colors. You had 6 dinosaurs. You had a very formulaic show. It is a formula show. But we tried to make each one a little different. But at some point, Rita would attack. There would be a monster. They would grow, and then the big giant robot would kick the monster's rear end, and that would be done. And I think the kids just really liked that.
Had you ever seen, were you familiar with the Super Sentai genre in Japan?
No, not at all. In fact, the first time I ever saw, I'd seen something of it in the previous couple of years, in that there had been some attempts to make a show like that at Saban that I was involved with. One of them was we took a show called Metalder, and I did a kind of a What's Up Tiger Lily treatment to it. We called it Metalhead. It was a total send up, very funny, lots of turnaround, and MTV almost bought it. We were up against Aeon Flux, and they decided to go cool instead of funny, which is good because Power Rangers would have never happened if they'd have bought that. And I'd seen another show called Winspector, which was a single, kind of almost a Kamen Rider type of show, which I'd helped edit and prepare for a European market. It actually never played here. So I'd seen a little bit of it, but the first time I really saw the whole, 5 characters jumping into a big giant robot stuff was when Hayam sat me and Ellen Levy-Sarnoff, who was the development executive at Saban, down and showed us this show called Zyurangers and explained to us that he wanted us to make an American show around that. And frankly, I thought he was out of his mind.
Now, was that so he had already already picked the show that you were going to do, which was
Yes.
Dinosaur Task Force Zyurangers.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think he originally wanted to use Jetoman, but it had passed too long, and they wanted to use a more recent title. I think that was maybe Toei's choice on that one.
right, because Zyurangers was pretty recent as far as coming into production. But the Super Sentai genre had been going on for years. I mean, every year.
About 20 years at that point, from what I've been told.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you did it, when you first got the task, looking at Zyurangers, and he's saying, "I want this for an American audience." I mean, walking out of that meeting, what was going through your head?
I thought he was nuts, but he's the boss, and that's what he's paying me to do. So I went and did it. I was trying to figure out how I could put that together. So part of my job in that whole thing was figuring out how to marry the two sides of the what we were going to shoot with the Japanese footage. And fortunately, a couple of years before, Shuki Levy, who was the other executive producer, had made an attempt at doing a show like this, based on Ultraman, or some version of Ultraman. And so they'd done this little video pilot, and kind of laid out the 5 basic characters and their relationships. And so I decided that rather than reinvent the wheel, I would use that, and used Shuki's original Ultraman treatment, and use those basic 5 characters. The only difference was that we changed the name from Victor to Jason for the Red Ranger, and then take those relationships and plug them in, and then see how it went. I thought he was a little crazy, but Haim is a little crazy, and I think it's that little bit of nutsiness that really kind of makes him kind of a little bit of a genius in some respects. And he was relentless about it. So the biggest thing I was thinking about was, how am I going to pull this off? Plus, I was feeling very intimidated in the fact that I had worked on a lot of anime, and at that point at Saban Entertainment, I was considered an associate producer. And I had worked on making shows, but never actually developing them. I'd done a little bit of development writing on a couple of other Saban shows, just to kind of help it go along. So here I have to start with a blank page and invent a television show based on these parameters that they gave me. And it was pretty intimidating. It took me a good month and a half to really kind of come up with how we were going to do it.
Did you watch every episode of Zyurangers?
No, we only had the first... trying to remember. No, we only had like the first 13, I think, ready to go that we could look at, which became significant later on that we only had 13. Mm-hmm. But I actually watched 4 or 5 episodes total when I first started doing this, and kind of figured the show out from there. Once I realized it was a very formulaic show, then I could put that aside and figure out the American side of it. Mm-hmm.
So how did you go about choosing the players, the actors who came in, and deciding the difference between, obviously there was the Rangers as they were in the original Zyurangers versus what the Rangers were going to be in this American production?
Well, we went through normal casting. I mean, once we decided to do the show and money was put into it, and I wrote a script and rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it again, and we wrote a lot of I wrote a lot of sales materials for it as well, like a 60-page Bible, story Bible, some marketing materials for the marketing guys to go out and start getting some merchandising together, and for Chaim to sell it to Fox Network. So once all that was done, we pretty much knew what we wanted, and so we put out a casting call. And we brought in about 300 people to a casting office in Burbank, and the parameters were that they had to be young, they had to be able to look like they were teenagers, but they couldn't actually be teenagers because of California labor laws. We needed them to, and they had to have some sort of practical physical experience. They either needed to be dancers or gymnasts or martial artists. Any of those. So they had to be able to exhibit that as well. And if they couldn't do that, then... And we went through 300 people and came up with, finally, I think 10 or 12 that kind of... We narrowed it down to 10 or 12 folks after about 2 weeks of auditions. And those were long, long days because I was in every session. And we from that point on, we out of those 12, we picked the kids that we thought were that had either the best acting or the best chemistry, and we ended up dividing them into 2 casts. And we thought the cast that we ended up with had the best chemistry, but we presented both casts to Fox, and they agreed, and that's who they picked.
Go through each one of the principals who start off. Basically, because they're kicking off this whole phenomenon, and obviously your first cast is your first team that's going out there. The process of picking, why did you pick Austin St. John to be the Red Ranger? And what was it, the thing that you saw in him, and also some of the others in that first group?
Wow, now I'm going back into the Wayback Machine in my head, because I wasn't the guy that made the choice. Obviously, it was a combination of Hayam and Shuki and a lot of other people and the network that made the choices. I think what brought them together and why we picked these particular people is because they showed a combination of innocence, if that's the right word, and physical ability, and a couple of them were actually pretty good actors, and just that combination between them. I don't think there was any one person in the group that really stood out that made us choose that group. I think it was the combination of them and how they worked together.
So there was a difference between the acting experience of the different actors.
Oh, absolutely, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Austin, who played Jason the Red Ranger, he was strictly a martial artist. He was actually too young, and we didn't find this out till we cast him. He had to get himself emancipated in order for him to work. He was only 17 when we cast him. He was going to be 18 before we started. About middle of the way through the first season, he was going to be 18, but we needed to cast him then, so he had to get himself emancipated. But he was strictly a martial artist. We picked him because he was good looking. He had a hero's countenance, so to speak. He was a master martial artist in about 5 different weapons. I don't know the degrees, but he's up there. He's one of those guys that can kill you with 2 fingers. He's one of those guys. And he seemed to have a good chemistry, and he could look heroic. Walter Jones, who played the Black Ranger, he was one of the experienced performers. He'd been doing cruise ship shows and musicals and working at Universal Studios tours and those shows. So he'd already had a background in performing, and was an outstanding dancer, and just had that kind of that fun. He's cool but not intimidating, and a pleasure to listen to and watch, and he could act, so that was helpful. Plus, he was such a good dancer, and in his audition, he managed to incorporate some martial arts moves into his hip hop dancing. So and therefore invented what we ended up incorporating that into the show and calling it hip hop keto. So we were able to play with that. Amy Jo Johnson, who played Kimberly the Pink Ranger, she was an experienced actress from back east. We picked her, I think, because she's diminutive. She's very tiny, and it kind of helped balance out the femininity of hers, because none of the Rangers are particularly tall. Plus she was a very good actress, and I actually should have some tape of her working during her auditions, working with another actress who ended up getting the Yellow Ranger only for the pilot, but and it was because of her that the other girl looked good. I think she was able to carry the scene and carry the less experienced actor. And she's pretty, she's cute, and that's all what we were looking for. David Yost, who played Billy the Blue Ranger. Billy, he actually came in looking for the Red Ranger job, but I don't know. We just kind of had this idea and asked him to wait and come back in and throw some glasses on and play this part, and he did it so well that he got it almost instantly at that point. He's another guy who was a bit of he had some experience acting. He was a gymnast though, so he was physically able to do a lot of stuff, and just played that kind of uncomfortable. I don't know. He seemed a little bit uncomfortable with himself at the time, and that translated into the character really well. So he was able to do that. That's why we cast him. The Yellow Ranger was interesting because we cast an actress named Audrey Dubois, to play her, and she played Trini in the pilot. And the reason Trini's name is Trini is because Audrey was Hispanic looking. Another person who just who did her martial arts kata at the auditions and scared the bejesus out of us all. She she was so powerful at that. Her acting was pretty weak, but because of she looked good with the other cast members, Amy Jo was able to carry her through the scene. So we figured the other characters would kind of carry her along until she got comfortable with the acting, and she was an amazing athlete to watch when she was doing her martial arts. Which there was a lot more in the pilot than there was in any of the shows.
Going with the Yellow Ranger in the original Zyurangers, it was actually a boy character. So, what was the decision? How was that decision made?
Well, we thought that, and Chaim felt really strongly about this, that we needed to have a multi-gender, multi-ethnic cast, and that was important. It was the message he wanted to send. He wanted to make the show available to everybody, and so we made the decision to go ahead and ignore the fact that Yellow Ranger was a boy in the original. Also, in the U.S., at certain ages, yellow's not a particularly masculine color, and so there was another reason. But we needed to have a couple of girls in this, and we needed them to be different races, and we needed to be, all the colors of Benetton, so to speak. And we thought that was really important, so that's why we chose to do it. And it really wasn't until none of us really noticed. I mean, we weren't really looking at the footage that closely until somebody asked, in some meeting, why does the Yellow Ranger, when he's in costume, have a package? And we kind of scratched our heads and moved on. But that was a conscious decision, and I thought it was at the time, and I still do think it was the right one.
You had a different actress playing the Yellow Ranger in the pilot, but then when you went to series, you brought in an actress, Tri Tran.
Yeah.
What was the process, and how did you guys come to that decision?
Well, the decision was kind of forced on us. The Audrey who played the Yellow Ranger in the pilot, there were some business issues that came up that we couldn't resolve with her before we moved forward, and so we decided to go a different way. I wasn't involved in the casting of Twee because I was busy preparing the Japanese footage and the first scripts for the first season, because by the time we were done shooting the pilot, we knew that the network was going to pick us up. Even before we finished the pilot, they told us they were going to pick us up, so that casting was done elsewhere. The only thing I was told was that she was going to be Asian rather than Hispanic, and that we wanted to play her as a kung fu artist, more of the artistic rather than the battling kung fu, and that she was Vietnamese and had an accent, and we were liking that. So we went ahead and I went ahead and altered the scripts and went forward with that, and Twee did a terrific job.
Filming the actual scenes that happened in Sunnyvale. I'm sorry,
Angel Grove?
Angel Grove! What am I thinking? I'm thinking, okay, cut that. Going back to the actual filming of the scenes in Angel Grove, I mean, that's the bulk of all the new material that was written, and having to fit that into the original episodes. Where did that take place, and how did you go about creating that, and what was the thoughts behind that?
Well, the exteriors for Angel Grove were done in various places around Los Angeles. At least in the first season, it was mostly down in the Culver City area. We had a soundstage down there, and in the soundstage was the command center where Zordon lived, and the juice bar where the kids hung out, and also Billy's garage, where they spent a lot of time in the first season, and then we had what's called a swing set. Not like a swing like kids, but a swing set where we could change it and alter it to make it whatever we needed to for various other stuff. That changed after the earthquake of '94, because the soundstage down there was damaged a bit. Angel Grove Park was actually Kenneth Hahn Park, and frankly it was a little disconcerting because there was some gang activity going on down there at the time, was a little disconcerting to be going in and seeing the park rangers wearing flak jackets. So when the earthquake hit and things were damaged and we had to make a move, they moved up to Valencia and Santa Clarita area, set up a soundstage there, and from seasons 2 on, up until they left to go to New Zealand, and when Disney took over the show, Angel Grove was basically Santa Clarita, and Castaic Park is Angel Grove Lake, and all of that. So that's where that was done. But the interiors of all the sets were always in a soundstage.
Working with the original footage, obviously not using the footage of the original Japanese actors in the non-costumed character parts, but for the villains, with all the creatures, Rita Repulsa and her entourage, how did that, working that in, fit into what you were going to do with Power Rangers and vice creating a new set of villains that were portrayed by American actors?
Well, the villains, actually, all the villains were always Japanese. We really didn't have any American-created villains until...
No, I mean, why going with the Japanese footage instead of creating?
Why go with the Japanese footage instead of creating? Part of that was a financial decision. By going with the Japanese footage, we could avoid several days of shooting. And as you may or may not know, a day on a set is very expensive. I mean, it can be $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a day to shoot some of these things, and that's if you're doing it cheaply. So partly that was the reason. Partly the reason was that I think Chaim felt, and in the long run I think he was proven right, that part of the flavor of the show that he liked so much was the silly villains that the Japanese put up. And the fact that only one of them actually had a mouth that we could see, being Rita, it lent itself to us to use ADR, rewrite the dialogue, and use that footage to our advantage. And so that's why we went with that. Plus, Rita's sets and her workshops and all that stuff, they were just gorgeous sets and would be very difficult to replicate here. We did have to make some accommodations in that we did send a film crew out to Japan, and we shot about an hour and a half, 2 hours of footage of the actress who plays Rita Repulsa in costume, speaking a bunch of English lines phonetically, so that we could cut them in every so often, and her lips would be saying English words, even though it was Barbara Goodson's voice. So that way we figured, and for a while it worked. We could actually fool the kids a little bit into not paying attention to that too much, and it really was about a year and a half till we started getting mail. And then they had a creative way to fix that. But that was part of it. And frankly, we had the Japanese send us all of their guest monsters. So we had all of the costumes here. So if we needed to shoot stuff here in the U.S. with whoever the monster du jour was going to be, we had those costumes available to us. And we did frequently.
Mm-hmm. So then you were actually able to get the American actors into the costumes, both the villains and the heroes, and just let them go to town on that.
To a certain extent, I mean, look, we showed the original Power Rangers, our American Power Rangers, in costume very rarely, and we mostly in the command center, and we made sure we did it quite a bit in the first 10 or 12 episodes to pretty much establish that they're the same people. But from a practical standpoint, to shoot that would have been difficult, and we put your actors at risk. I mean, these guys were our stars, so we couldn't put them at too much risk. Doing stunts is dangerous. So whenever on the show they would jump out of the scene, and it would either move on to Japanese footage, or we would have stunt people in the costumes that would be shot by a separate unit. So they rarely, I don't think ever did an actual Power Ranger fight. Well, no, that's not true. There was the I forgot the name of the place they were stuck, but there was one scene where Austin as Jason the Red Ranger had to fight Goldar, and in a set that we created, and he was not in costume at the time. So there was a couple of times when they had to interact, but most of the time that was a stunt crew.
What sort of cooperation did you get from the Japanese people, as far as when you talked about them supplying you the villain costumes? What did they think of the product that you guys were putting out? I mean, obviously they'd been at it for 20 years, but seeing it being marketed in the United States or being made, what was their reaction? What was their level of cooperation?
Well, I didn't know that this at the time, but in the last couple of years, I've gotten a chance to go out to Tokyo and in pursuit of a documentary I hope to finish someday on this. And I got to talk to the head of Toei, the company that produces the Sentai series in Japan. And he told me that he thought we were nuts, that this would never fly for American audiences, and that he was very reluctant to participate. And it wasn't until Hayam did some had a pretty aggressive meeting with him that he thought that maybe Hayam was crazy enough to pull it off. So he granted the license. The cooperation was, I mean, in terms of we could have anything that they'd already created. In terms of altering what they were doing in their shows for future seasons in order to make it easier for us, we tried, and they'd accommodate a little bit, but by and large, they were mostly concerned, and still to this day, are mostly concerned with how those shows play in Japan, not the way they played here. In fact, there was I don't know if this is an urban legend, I don't know, but I had heard that there was one of the character creators was very upset with how we had manipulated and changed the show, because Power Rangers bears very little resemblance story-wise to anything that's been shown in Japan, and was very upset, and actually even came over to the United States. Again, this may be an urban legend. Came over to the United States to have words with the folks at Saban, and pretty much about that time the first licensing check came through. And once he saw that, was very, very convinced that we were doing the right thing. So again, I don't know if that's a true story, but somebody told me that. When I was there.
Now, upon release, the first time it's broadcast, when did you realize that, wow, this thing is taking off?
Well, there was a couple of steps to that, because we started shooting in February of '93, and it didn't air until September. And after we got the first couple of episodes in the can, I had seen there had been a focus group that had already been done with just the Japanese footage. No sound effects. Oh, there's some explosion sound effects and stuff, but just the Japanese fights with a rock and roll score and no dialogue. And they showed that to a bunch of kids, and the kids went completely crazy. They thought it was the greatest thing they'd ever seen. So we kind of had an inkling that it would be popular. And then when we got the first, I guess the third or fourth episode done and in the can, my daughter was in the third grade at the time, and I got permission from one of the teachers there, for her teacher to bring in an episode, and to talk to them about how TV shows were made, and show them some behind the scenes footage, and then show them an episode of Power Rangers, and the episode was the clown episode. It was like episode 13 or something like that, where they have to fight Pineapple the Clown or something along those lines. And I watch these 7-year-olds. They're going crazy, and they're yelling and screaming. And the TV show comes on, and they go dead silent, and they're just glued to the TV set. And then we have about a 20-second break in the middle where the commercial's supposed to go, and they're all talking, and the show comes back up, and they're fixed to it again. And then the next day, I get thank you notes from the teacher that the kids had put together, and these kids knew the characters' names, their dinosaurs, their colors, all of this stuff from one watching. So we had a bit of an inkling that it was going to go well. Hayam thought, this is like the day before we premiered, that we would get maybe we'd be number one occasionally, maybe hopefully we'd be number 1 or 2 in the time slot, and garner enough support that we should get about 3 to 5 years out of the show, and that's what he was hoping for as best case scenario. And in fact, the night before we premiered, we'd finished a meeting on some other subject, and he turned to me and said, "You know what? If we pull this off, it'll be the miracle of the century." It's the only time in the entire time I worked for him that I ever saw him nervous, was the night before that aired. Mm-hmm. So the answer is, it was a real surprise when it just exploded and took off the way it did. It took us all aback. We weren't prepared for it, mm-hmm. and we're frankly thrilled.
Obviously, it was extremely successful, both ratings wise, merchandising wise, but that led to some strife amongst the production and the cast after that first season.
Well, I don't know if strife. I mean, anytime you put together a group of young actors and have them work, 14 hours, 12 to 14 hours a day, and working in close quarters. I mean, they did all have their own dressing rooms, but But working on a soundstage, it's long. I mean, people say show business is glamorous, but it really is a lot of work, and some of it's very dirty work, and a lot of it's very long hours and that sort of thing. Tensions do rise, and camps of actors come up and they go and they move around. The issue I think that you're leading me to was the change of cast in the middle of the second season, and that had to do with the contracts were up. Because we had only intended on making 40 episodes in the first season, 45 episodes for the first season, but it had gone so well, the network ordered more, and they wanted, so we ended up making 65, which had almost run out what we were considering 2 seasons worth of episodes. So when the contracts were up, we had to negotiate, and at the time they knew that Fox had licensed a film and was going to take them to Australia, and so there was some disagreement as to how much they should be paid and how much merchandising should be covered, and they couldn't come to an agreement. So instead of renewing the contracts, the 3 Rangers, Twee, Walter, and Austin decided to not renew and to move on, and so we had to recast, and that was pretty much the way it went. Contrary to popular effect, they were not fired. It was their choice to walk away. The contracts were up, and it was just a matter of whether they wanted to renew or not.
The production of Power Rangers going into the halfway through the second season when the casting change was made, the live action movie was becoming a reality at that point, correct?
Yeah, it was already in the progress. 20th Century Fox had gone ahead and licensed it and was going to make the movie. It was already the script was already being written at that time, and part of I believe the reasons that there were some disagreements with the original cast was because of that movie and financial things surrounding that. So what we ended up having to do actually was shut down production for 2 or 3 weeks when we came around to that, and we went on a nationwide casting tour. They went. I mean, I didn't go, but we sent casting people to L.A., Dallas, Miami, New York, and Chicago, and they looked at hundreds and hundreds of people.
You didn't look at the other group that had been
the original group. No, well, they did. It was the original, the second cast. You mean that we'd picked?
Yes.
Yeah. They were a little older, and that was one of the reasons why they looked a little older, and they were taller. So it would have been a problem physically. There was a reason that we didn't put them together. And a couple of those people had been brought in to play guest characters along the line in the first couple of seasons, a guest student here and there and that sort of thing. And we had some experience with adding cast and changing some cast earlier when we had to do a quick thing, because I said earlier that I'd only seen 13 episodes when we first started. Well, when I finally started working on the second half of the first season and got into episodes 14, 15, and on, that was the first time we realized there was actually a 6th Ranger, the Green Ranger, and so that was we had to scramble very quickly, and suddenly we had to cast another person. That's where we got Jason Franks in to become Tommy, and but that was a big surprise to us because we'd worked so hard on those first 13 episodes, and when we turn our attention to the other ones, it's like, oh my gosh, did anybody know that we had another Ranger coming? So and if you ever want to do one of these shows, look at all the episodes first. So when we went through that, the casting went about a week. They took a week to do this, and literally we got all 3 of the new cast members from Dallas. After a week of casting, they came up with the 3 replacements, and they all came from the Dallas casting, and that was Steve Cardenas, Karen Ashley, and Johnny Young Bosch. And I really kind of felt sorry for them at the same time as excited for them, and because it was a big whirlwind. I mean, literally. With Johnny Bosch especially, because I've talked to him about this since, but he goes in on a Monday or Tuesday and goes and auditions. On a Wednesday, they send him a plane ticket, come to Los Angeles for a callback. On Thursday, he's in town to call back. We go through the callbacks for the cast people. I actually got to attend that. On Friday, he goes home. And by the time he gets there, he's told he's cast. He has to pack, climb back on a plane on Sunday, be back out to Los Angeles. They move him into a motel, and on Tuesday morning, he's on the set working. I mean, it was that fast. And then 30 days later, he's shipped off to Australia to shoot a movie. So this is how fast it went for these guys. And Johnny was just a kid. I mean, he was really young back then. Maybe he was just 18. And the others were not quite as young, and it didn't affect them quite as much. But it was still a big whirlwind for them all. And out of all of them, really only Karen had really only been a performer professionally before that, and she came from music. So it was pretty quick, and fortunately it all worked out for them, and the folks at 20th Century didn't beat them up too much.
How did the cast members who had stayed, Amy Jo and David Yost, how receptive were they when the new cast came in?
Well, about that point, I wasn't spending a lot of time on the set. From what I heard, they were very receptive and very welcoming. And although, again, you get a group of young actors together, and they're going to have family problems here and there, but those didn't develop until much later. And they'd already dealt with some cast changes with, bringing in Jason Franks and the year before and all that stuff. So it went really well. It was fairly seamless, actually. I was stunned at how seamless it was. And an interesting thing happened is that as soon as we changed the cast, the ratings shot up, and the toys started selling better, which was kind of counterintuitive to the way American casting has been done in the past. Then later on, when Amy Jo decided to leave, when she decided that she wanted to move on, and we brought in Catherine Sutherland, the same thing happened, which is what eventually led to the decision to follow along the Japanese style of casting and change the cast every year. Now, the original cast members who were there, who are still there, David Yost and Balkan Skull, which is Paul Schreier and Jason Narby, out of respect, they could stay as long as they wanted, but eventually, they had to leave too. But every other cast member after that was changed every year or so.
So moving on to the movie, for yourself, working, going from being an associate producer on a television show, and then actually, developing a television show with Power Rangers. Now you're moving on to an actual motion picture.
Well, I really didn't work on the movie. I mean, I wasn't supposed to work on the movie. They had hired some movie writers, as they didn't want any television writers working on the show. If you'd note a bit of bitterness on that, you're hearing that correctly. Surely they saw the value in actually talking to someone who actually knew the show. No, they never talked to me. They never talked to me. And in fact, I had been told about a conversation between Chaim and the head of Fox Family Films at the time, and when they were going back and forth on the script, and he'd mentioned something about the fact that, well, I've got the guy that wrote the original stuff that helped invent the show, and why don't we use him? And he says, I don't want any TV hacks working on my show. So that was it wasn't personal. He didn't know me, but his opinion of the film industry's opinion of television people can be a little odd and unfair at times. So I wasn't really scheduled to work on the movie at all. They were going to go off. At the time, what they had me doing was writing the live tour, the international live tour that went on. So I actually wrote that. And then they were sending me to Australia for 3 weeks to go work on the TV show, because there was still all the dubbing that had to be done, all of the ADR, dialogue replacement, for those of you who don't know what ADR is, for the TV show, because we had episodes coming in November, and they were going to be out there shooting the movie. So I got to go out there for 3 weeks to Sydney, Australia, and watch. And the film, the production was not going well. They were having a lot of technical problems. They were having organizational issues. And quite frankly, I thought they were having some script problems too after I read the original movie script. And so Chaim Saban asked me to stay there for additional and kind of pay attention to what was going on for him, make sure that they didn't ruin our little golden goose. And that resulted in us, the production ended up getting way behind until a producer by the name of John Landau joined on board and kind of fixed it. John, if those of you who don't know his name, eventually went on to win Academy Awards for producing Titanic, and just recently produced Avatar. So he ended up being a big fish, and he actually kind of fixed things up. But because they were running so behind, the Rangers were not going to get home in time to shoot episodes for February, because this was being done in the fall, Australia's summer. And So we ended up having to write and shoot. I ended up there for 3 months. Let me put it that way. And Shuki Levy, who's the executive producer of the show, came into town and said, Tony, I have good news and bad news. And what's that? He says, well, the bad news is you're going to have to stay here in Sydney, and the good news is you're going to get to produce 3 episodes, because I was the only producer in country. And I was pretty strictly a story guy up to that point. And so we ended up producing 3, actually shooting 4, and airing 3 episodes that we did completely there with no Japanese footage. I hired an Australian crew. We found locations. We found sets. I even played the villain on camera in costume.
What villain was that?
The Wizard of Deception. And I was his voice, but I was also the character in the costume. And it was really got to be the most fun I've ever had in my career. It was true guerrilla shooting on a big scale. Because guerrilla shooting usually don't have cranes and film cameras, but and we shot 3 wonderful episodes that have stood up the test of time and have been among the most requested and sold in home video. So it ended up being quite an adventure, and I came home 3 months later.
What story arc was that?
This was the the 3 episodes were the episodes where the Power Rangers went back in time to colonial America. And the reason that is because we found a location just north of Sydney in a town called Woy Woy, a place called Old Sydney Town, which is kind of like Williamsburg, Virginia is here, where they have a representation of Sydney in the year 1792. Well, it looked an awful lot like Virginia in 1776.
Now, how did you find this location? I mean,
I got in a car and started looking for locations, and I was trying to look for some strange because the forests out there look different than here. The trees are different. Some of those areas look a little like Africa even. So I was looking for locations out of the city that we could shoot. And I ran across this sign that said Old Sydney Town, so I thought I'd go check it out and went, well, this is great. Took pictures, Shugi agreed, and we literally wrote the episodes for that location. And all we had to do, they had a full contingent of employees there with their own costumes that were all period correct, including livestock. No matter where you pointed the camera, you didn't see anything modern, no power lines, nothing. And we were able to rent the location. And their employees in costume as our extras. And the only difference was the redcoats in Australia wore a different kind of hat. So we just changed the hats out. The redcoats didn't wear hats in our version, and it was wonderful. I thought it was it really was a lot of fun, and we shot it took about a week to shoot all 3 episodes.
Now, when you come back to the States, did your role on Power Rangers change?
Well, it had to a certain extent because I hadn't been around, but I was also had started moving out of story and really wanted to produce more actively, and certainly the episodes that we shot in Australia really gave me a taste for that, because I did those completely on my own. Well, not on my own. I mean, I had help, and Shuki Levy and frankly Paul Schreier and Jason Narvi, who played Bulk and Skull, kind of stepped up and were assistant directors and helped me produce the thing. So I started to move into more of the live stuff, more of the ancillary. I started directing a lot of the live performances that the Power Rangers would do when they would, not the originals, but our stunt crew would do when we were doing like licensing presentations and stuff like that. And started moving. That was pretty much when I started kind of inching my way out of the show. And soon after that, Saban announced that they were going to set up a family films division. And I really wanted to do that, so I walked at that point, right about the time Turbo showed up. I moved out of the Power Rangers and went to work for the Family Film Division, and we did a movie called Rusty the Great Rescue, which starred Blake Foster, who eventually became Blue Ranger on Turbo. So that's how we met him.
Thank you for listening to this first episode of the RoboTalk podcast. Please consider supporting us at patreon.com/RoboTalk to help us constantly improve the show and bring in more exciting guests. Until then, thank you for watching and listening. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.